Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. Today's project is a request from a viewer. I've had many requests and I've got a list a mile long, so one day I will try to get to them all. Today's request was a card holder, but it was a card holder that you could better use for games like Canasta, the rummy kind games where you can make your melds and put everything in order. This one will hold loads of cards and it stores away nice and easily for future use. Hang around and I'll show you how to make this multi-pocket card holder. Okay, here's everything that we need. I have a piece of Velcro or hook and loop tape that is 9 inches long. This one's only about 3/4 inch wide, but a 1 inch wide won't hurt either. A hook and loop tape at 9 inches. Then we've got 3 strips 5.5 inches by 11 inches. We'll fold those right side together and then just give it a press. I have 3 pieces of buckram, and buckram is a really stiff, like a heading tape or a stabilizer. And if you don't have buckram, you can use just a regular iron-on interfacing. We only need a little bit of stabilizer for one side of these strips. My plan is to slide the buckram inside after I've stitched it together. But if you've got interfacing instead, we just want a little bit of stability. If you have buckram, 2.5 inches wide by 10.5 inches long, or if you don't, use some interfacing at 2.5 inches wide and 10.5 inches long. Then we need 2 pieces of fabric. This is a really pretty paisley print. Some time ago I received a carload of free fabric from a viewer. This is one of the fabrics in here, and I did ask at the time what people would like to see used. So Cynthia, I'm finally getting to use this paisley fabric that you had picked out. For this project we need 2 pieces that are 11 inches wide by 20 inches long. So we've got 2 of those, and one of them needs to be stabilized. So I have fused some iron-on pallin to the back of that, same size, 11 inches by 20. So we only need the pallin on 1 piece of fabric. And the last thing that we need is some template plastic. Now, not everybody has template plastic or access to it, so you can use cardboard instead. This is just one big sheet. You'll need to have at least 18 inches by 11 inches, and we'll cut that to size later on. So if you don't have template plastic, you can use cardboard or something else that's quite stiff. If you have access to Peltex, you can skip that step and actually just put Peltex on the one side of the fabric. Okay, let's start putting this together. The first thing we want to do is take our 3 strips of fabric, fold those in half right side together, give that a really good press, and then we're going to take it to the machine and stitch down one long edge. If you have interfacing, you can go and iron that onto one side of each of these 3 pieces of fabric. If you have buckram or something else stiff that you can slide in later, you can go and grab that too, but it just needs to be very thin. So we'll take that to the machine and we'll stitch straight down the long edges on those 3. And I'm using 1/4 inch seam allowance throughout the whole project. Okay, just 1/4 inch stitch all the way down the long edges of all 3 pieces, and back stitch at the beginning and the end as well. Now we can turn these the right way round and give it another good press. When you've turned your fabric the right way round, we have a little tube there, and if you've ironed your interfacing on already, line up the edge that's got the seam just along the bottom edge there and give that a press, and your interfacing will sit really nicely inside like that. That's if you've used a fusible interfacing. If you're using buckram or something stiff like what I'm using here, take your tube and place the seam along the back center, finger press it so that the seam sits on the one side all the way along. Take your buckram, curl it up and feed it into your tube. This will be 1/4 inch shorter at each end. So you can see there's a little bit of excess fabric there and on this side, and you can straighten that up and then press that. Using the buckram gives you a really nice firm edge for your cards to slot in there. So whether you're using interfacing or buckram, either way, just press that so that we've got this sitting nice and flat, and then we can set them all aside. The next thing we need to do with our 2 rectangular pieces of fabric, and one of them has the pallin on it, and that will become the outside of our card holder. take your 2 pieces of hook and loop tape and we're going to mark a line 1/2 inch from the edge on one side, and on the other piece of fabric we'll do the same thing. We'll just mark a 1/2 inch line. Okay, so we have 2 lines marked 1/2 inch from one end of the fabric. Take one of your Velcro pieces and center your Velcro at that 1/2 inch line. You can, if you like, just use a double-sided tape just to position the Velcro. Makes it a little bit easier and you don't have the pins distorting your fabric, and it helps keep everything in place. I've got the center marked on my fabric, the tape run along there, and I'll just position the center right on that line, and that Velcro sits nice and flat. So it's actually much neater than this. All right, we have both pieces of Velcro in position at one end of each of the pieces of fabric. We'll go and take that to the machine and stitch that all the way around. With the Velcro in place, we need to now make our markings for the card slots. Taking the end that doesn't have any Velcro on it, and we want the one that's got the palette on it, we're going to measure up 6.5 inches from the short end here. Width of my ruler is 6.5 inches. I just need to mark a line going straight across, and from that line I'm going to do another one at 6 inches. Mark another line. So here I've got 6.5 inches and then I've got 6 inches, and from this line here we'll also mark another 6 inches. These are going to be the triangle points of our card holder. Now that we know that, we know whereabouts we need to put our card slots. So Velcro down here. This section is our base. This is the section that will face our players, and this is the section that we're going to put our card slots. We're going to position the top of our first card slot 1.25 inches from this line here. So there's our 1.25 inch position, and that is where we're going to put our first card slot. And then the next card slot is going to be 1 inch down from that, so we want to have a 1 inch space, and that's so that the cards can be tiered. So the next one will sit just like that, and then the third one will sit 1 inch from that fold. So if you have a look at this, that will be how the cards are staggered on your card holder. Once you've got those positions marked, just take your ruler and mark a line at the very bottom here. That's the placement of the bottom row. Mark another line, and that's the placement of the second row, and we already know this one is going along that line. Now we're going to start with this one first. We're going to take that to the machine, make sure you've centered that evenly across the side, and then with a narrow 1/8 inch top stitch we're going to secure that straight down this long edge here, just along the bottom. That's all we need to do for now. When you've done that one, take this next card slot, place that on this line, and you'll do the same thing, 1/8 inch top stitch. When that one's done, take this final one and place that on your bottom line, and then another 1/8 inch top stitch. And then if you want to, you can just go and run some stitches along the side there to secure it in place. So just along the bottom, we'll do a back stitch at this end and at the other end. So there's our narrow stitching along there. That's our card slot, and we'll run the next one right along that line there. One more to go, and that will just go along that bottom line there. And if you want to stop this flapping about, you can just go and stitch very close to the edge here. All right, we're more than halfway through. We have our Velcro at this end, card slots down here. Grab your other piece, and we're going to place this right sides together, and the Velcro will be at this end. I've pinned this together all the way around, and we have our card slots at this end here. At the opposite end, we want to leave an opening of about 2 to 3 inches, and that's going to be so that we can turn everything through the right way when we finish stitching around. So we're going to start here, back stitch at this end, come all the way up, stitch all the way around, come back around up to here, back stitch here, and once you've stitched all the way around, clip your corners, and then we can turn this the right way around. And remember, we just want a 1/4 inch seam allowance. As I go into the corner, I will back stitch and then come forward again and do a couple of stitches forward and then back. Now, I forgot to mention, we still need to get our template plastic in here. So you want to make sure you've got plenty of room to be able to slot your plastic in. Leave about 5 or 6 inches opening at this end here. We can trim off our corners. And if you've got any overhang from your pockets, then we can trim that off as well. And let's turn this the right way around. Once you've turned this the right way around, take it back to the iron and give it a really good press. Just make sure that the seams here are right on the very edge. You don't want to have the back peeking forward, and likewise you don't want to have the front peeking back. Just have your seams centered right on the very edge and everything nice and flat. And then we will go and do a top stitch down the 2 long edges and along the bottom edge. Before we put our template plastic in, we need to top stitch the outside edges and along the bottom. So I'll go and do that now, just a narrow top stitch right down the very edge, along the bottom, and leave the top edge open. Before we cut our template plastic, we want to double check the measurements on the side here. So the aim is to get our plastic insert in this section here. And you have to take into account the top stitching that we've done on either side. Our plastic templates need to be smaller than that. So I've got 10 1/4 inches here. I'm going to make it 10 inches because I want a little bit of movement in there as well. That will allow for the thickness of the template plastic. So I've got 10 inches wide across here, and I'll just double check that across here. So I've got nearly 10 1/4 and nearly 10 1/4 there. So each of my 3 pieces are going to be 10 inches. And then I've got my top stitching along the bottom edge here. So the plastic obviously can't go as far as that. And we don't want it to go further than this line that we had drawn earlier. If we measure that, that is 6 1/4 inches. So we're going to bring that down to 6 inches. So my first plastic template is going to be 10 inches by 6 inches. It just so happens that my template plastic is 20 inches in length. So I'm going to cut one long strip at 6 inches. So if you're using template plastic and your rotary cutter, you want to be very careful cutting this. So I've really just scored a line along the edge of the plastic. And that will snap off easily like that. And then I'll cut 10 inches. All right, it's now time to slot this into the first section of our pocket. You can roll the template plastic in half slightly and feed that into the opening. You can leave a bigger opening just to make it easier for yourself. And slide that plastic until it hits the bottom. The template plastic is just at the bottom here. That lines up nicely. And what we can do now is stitch that in place. So we need to carefully go and stitch along the edge here, but you don't want to stitch through the plastic. Now, it's actually not an issue really if you stitch through the plastic on this. It's not going to damage the machine, and likewise if you're using a cardboard as well. I'm going to stitch straight on that original line that I have marked earlier, and that will close up the plastic section, and then we'll do the next one. Double check that your plastic is on the right side of your foot. And you can feel that with your finger as well. Okay, this one is in place nicely here. We've got our stitching line across the top there. We need to put the next piece of plastic in this section here. We know that this here, we've got 10 inches that we've allowed. We just need to work out how much room we've got between this drawn line here and the stitching line we've just done. So that is 6 inches from that line to that line. We don't want our template plastic to be as big as that. And again, that's to allow for the thickness of the plastic and just for ease inside here. So 6 inches across here, I'm going to make my next piece of template plastic 5 3/4 inches. And that'll just give a nice amount of space. So that's got a nice bit of space just in between the stitching lines. We'll feed that one into the opening as well. Okay, our next piece of plastic is inserted in there. That's within that drawn line that we've already got here. Before we close this up, we're going to put a couple of clips in the side just to hold the plastic in place. And the reason we're not going to stitch this down now is because we still need to get one more piece of plastic inside. And it'll just make it a little bit easier for us to manipulate and turn the plastic if that's not stitched. We've got our drawn line across here that we had done earlier, and we'll just measure the distance between those two lines. And that is 6 inches again. So the next piece I'm going to cut will also be 5 3/4 inches by 10 inches. So that one's clipped in place, it's not going to move, and we'll just slide this one in now. Okay, that one is in place. So now that this one is in place here, before I actually put the final piece of plastic in position, I'm now going to close this one up. That's my stitching line here. I've got the other piece of plastic well out of the way at the moment. I'll quickly go and stitch that one. Then I'll push my plastic toward that stitched line, and then we'll stitch along that line there. Okay, I'm going to slide that piece of plastic down to that line I've just stitched. Make sure the plastic is on the inside of the drawn line and finish the last one. Now, this section is completely optional, but I do have a tiny little piece of template plastic left over. Rather than throwing it out or wasting it or saving it for another day, I'm going to insert that in this section here, because I still need to close this up and top stitch it. So I've got about 1 inch of space in here. I'm going to cut my plastic down to 3/4 of an inch and just sit that inside. That'll just give it a little bit more stability. Okay, I'll slot that in there. So that last piece of plastic is tucked in nicely. I'm just going to go and stitch right along that very top edge to close up the opening and also finish that last bit of top stitching. And there we have it, our playing card holder completely finished. Pop your cards in here so you can see if you're playing a game of cards where you've got to hold a lot of cards. This certainly does hold a lot of them. To assemble it, bring the base up and connect that with the Velcro just here. And there we have our card holder. What do you think? I think this has come up really well, and it's such a versatile little card holder as well. Very easy to put away with the Velcro underneath. Now, if you don't have Velcro, you can use the little snap fasteners or the plastic snaps. Folds out flat, and you can tuck it away and hide your cards if you need to go and visit the powder room or something, so nobody's going to get to see your cards. Anyway, it folds away nice and flat, and it certainly holds a heck of a lot of cards as well, and very easy to put back together again, just like that. So what do you think? Is this something that you would make to sell? I haven't decided if I will. I think that they'll actually do well. In fact, whilst talking to you, I'm thinking I'm actually going to make a few to sell. I'll see how they go. They're quick enough to make. I might make a few of them up and see how they go with the added cost of the materials. I'm going to make a batch of them, work out how long it takes me to make them, and then I'll come up with a price, and hopefully in a future video I'll be able to give you a sales report and let you know how these actually go. So let me know what you think. Catch you next time.